Welcome to Fear Spiral. It started with an ordinary mirror. You know, the kind you'd find at a thrift store for $5.73, which is exactly what college student Emily paid for it. She brought it home to her small apartment and hung it up in the bathroom. The mirror had an old, ornate gold frame that was, well, to be honest, a little cracked in some places. But Emily liked it. It was the cheapest thing in the store that wasn't broken beyond repair. And besides, she thought it would look nice in her apartment. She didn't notice anything particularly strange about it until she got home and hung it up. It was then that she noticed the cracks in the frame and how, well, cold it was to the touch. But again, she shrugged it off. She placed the mirror on the wall directly across from her bed so that she could admire herself while laying down. It was then that the first unsettling incident occurred. Emily was laying down trying to read a book, but the words just weren't coming into focus, so she propped the book up on her bedside table and stared directly into the mirror. At first, she thought she was just tired and seeing things, but when she turned off the lights, she swore she saw a faint figure standing in the reflection, a woman wearing a long, flowing dress. Startled, Emily sat up in bed and looked away. When she turned back, the figure was gone. Had she imagined it? Was she just really tired? She decided that it must have been the latter and went back to trying to read her book. But then she noticed something else. Even when she walked out of the room, the figure remained in the mirror, as if it were stuck in place, frozen in time. That's when fear began to set in. She knew that whatever was in that mirror was not supposed to be there, and yet when she turned the lights back on, the figure was once again gone. Shaken and confused, Emily decided to leave the apartment for the rest of the day. She didn't want to be alone in that apartment with whatever was in the mirror. As the hours passed, the unease in her chest slowly turned into anger. Why was she letting some creepy old mirror get to her? She was a strong, intelligent woman, or at least she tried to be. With a deep breath, she opened the door and stepped back inside. She turned the lights off, leaving only the faint glow of the hallway light to illuminate the room. And there it was again, the figure in the mirror, beckoning to her, smiling. Or was it a grimace? Emily couldn't tell. What she did know was that she didn't like what she was seeing. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, she reached out and ripped the mirror from the wall. As the glass hit the floor and shattered, the figure let out a blood-curdling scream. Then it was gone. Gasping for breath, Emily slowly began to clean up the mess, her hands shaking. As she surveyed the damage, she noticed something in the shards of glass. Etched into the mirror's surface was a single word, a warning, perhaps, or maybe a name. The word was beware. It was late. The house was silent. Emily sat at her desk working on her laptop when she heard it. A soft knock on the window. She turned to look out into the darkness, but all she saw was the silhouette of a lone tree swaying in the wind. Had she imagined it? Just a branch tapping against the glass, nothing more. She went back to work, but sleepiness was now upon her. Emily shut down her computer and climbed into bed. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Stretching, Emily got up and walked over to the window. She pulled back the curtains and gasped. On the inside of the glass, there were fingerprints. Small, perfect circles, like someone had pressed their palms against the window from the outside, trying to get in. But that was impossible. The window was locked, and besides, there were no fingerprints on the outside of the window. But then she noticed something else. The prints were small, childlike. Had her little brother gotten out of bed and wandered into the living room in the middle of the night? But he never left the bedroom unless she was with him, and she had been right by him when they went to bed the night before. Suddenly, she felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on her laptop. Had she left it open? Of course she had. She always worked late. But that wasn't it. She remembered shutting down her computer and locking her window. So why would her prints be on the inside of the glass? Then she looked at her hands. They were clean. Whoever had left the prints on the window hadn't touched anything else. He or she had come in, knocked on the window, then left without touching anything. That night, Emily didn't sleep a wink. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those small fingerprints. Then she heard it again, a soft knock on the window. She whirled around to face the window. Outside, the wind was howling. The tree branches were scraping against the glass, making the same sound as last night. But then the knocking stopped. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Maybe it was just the wind. Just the wind. And then she heard the whispers. "We are here," they said. "We are here watching." Their voices were like the rustling of leaves, but they were right outside her window. "Waiting," they whispered. Emily threw herself back on the bed, burying her head under the covers. Then she felt it, a cold, bony fingertip on the back of her hand. She screamed, but the fingertip just kept tapping, tapping, tapping like a drum on her skin. She ripped her hand away and squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the finger was gone. So was the window. In its place was a dark, gaping hole. The voices were getting louder now. "We are here," they hissed. "We are here watching, waiting." The walls were closing in, suffocating her. She had to get out, had to escape, had to breathe. Emily threw open the window and jumped. This happened over 3 nights ago. The first night was the worst. Emily had just gotten home from work. She was exhausted. She just wanted to take a shower and go to bed. But when she turned on the shower, the water was ice cold. And when she turned off the lights and went to sleep, she could have sworn she heard a whisper in her ear that said, "Let me in." She just assumed it was the wind. The next day at work, Emily told her best friend, Sarah, everything that had happened the night before. And Sarah, being the good friend that she is, invited Emily to come stay with her for a few nights until whatever it was that was happening in Emily's apartment stopped. But the third night was the worst. Emily's roommate Sarah was the first to scream. The mirror had shown Emily's reflection blinking. 2 seconds too late, the reflection smiled, but Emily wasn't smiling. "Get out of my body," Emily screamed, but it was too late. The creature had already possessed her completely. It stepped out of the mirror, its eyes glowing a bright red in the darkness of the room. It looked at Emily and Sarah and whispered, "Let me in," and then, as if it were beckoning them closer, it slowly began to walk towards the mirror. It reached out its hand and touched the cool glass. The moment its fingers made contact, the mirror rippled like water and the creature stepped back into it. The mirror then returned to its normal state, the image of Emily's smiling face staring back at them. Emily and Sarah stared at each other for a moment, both of them frozen in fear. Then, as if they were trying to break the same curse, they both screamed at the top of their lungs and jumped into the arms of each other. They stayed in that position for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. When they finally pulled away from each other, they noticed that the room was filled with an eerie silence. There was no longer a sinister presence looming over them, and when they looked back at the mirror, all they saw was their own terrified reflections staring back at them. They spent the rest of the night cuddling on Sarah's couch, too afraid to go to sleep, and as soon as the sun began to rise, they called an exorcist. Yeah, turns out that's not a very common thing to call, so it took a while for someone to actually come, but eventually, Father Michael arrived. He performed an exorcism in Emily's apartment, and then he performed one in Sarah's apartment just to be sure. And then, as if it was summoned by the mention of his name, the creature appeared behind him and whispered in his ear, "You have nothing to fear. I am here to help." And then the creature stepped forward and the light from the sun hit its face, causing it to evaporate into a pile of dust. "I didn't know you could do that," Father Michael said to Emily and Sarah. "What?" Emily asked. "Well, I didn't know you could control it until you did," Father Michael replied. "You simply have to befriend it, be one with it." He then proceeded to explain to them that the creature was not a demon, but rather a fragment of their subconsciousness, a manifestation of their deepest fears, and the only way to get rid of it would be to confront those fears head-on. Of course, this was easier said than done, but with the help of Father Michael, Emily and Sarah were eventually able to banish their inner demons once and for all. Every time Sarah begged her friend Emily to throw the mirror away, Emily refused. She loved that mirror. It was an antique that she'd found at a yard sale for only $10. And even though its surface was cracked and it had no frame, she couldn't bring herself to part with it. "I don't care if it's just a piece of glass, we have to get rid of it," Sarah insisted one day. "I feel like it's watching me." Emily laughed and turned back to her computer. "It's just a mirror. Silly, how could it be watching you?" But that night, after everyone had gone home, Sarah snuck back in. She and Emily lived together in a big house with a few other people. The mirror was in the living room, propped up against the wall. Sarah circled it slowly, her eyes narrowed. Then she reached out and touched its surface. It felt warm. She remembered Emily mentioning how the mirror was heavier than it looked, and as Sarah stood there staring at the cracked glass, she understood why. It was as if the mirror was sucking the life out of her, filling her with dread. She wanted to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. When she finally tore her eyes away from the mirror, she saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the room. It beckoned to her, its finger long and skeletal, then it vanished. Terror gave way to morbid curiosity. Sarah began researching old mirrors and came across a legend about a family who had mysteriously vanished years ago. The last place they were seen was at an antique shop, the same one where Emily had bought the mirror. The story said the mirror was cursed, that those who stared too long would never look away again. but there had to be more to the story. Sarah continued searching and finally found a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Family of 5 vanishes without a trace." The story told how a husband, wife, and their 3 children had disappeared without leaving a single clue behind. Their house had been left in perfect condition, food was still on the table, and toys lay strewn about, as if they'd simply vanished into thin air. But what did it have to do with the mirror? Sarah wanted answers, but she knew Emily would never let her destroy the mirror, so she hatched a plan. She pretended to be moving out, packed up the mirror, and took it with her. The moment she stepped out of the house, she felt lighter. As soon as the front door slammed shut behind her, she turned around and walked back inside. She had barely taken 2 steps when she felt a sharp pain in her chest, as if an invisible hand had gripped her heart. The mirror was heavy, but it was worth it. For the first time since she'd moved in, she felt truly free. One stormy night, the power went out. Only lightning illuminated the room, and in each flash I saw more hands pressing against the inside of the mirror. Dozens of pale, lifeless faces stared out. Their mouths moved. They were whispering, "Join us." It had started subtly. A single hand had appeared on the glass one evening as I was leaving the office. At first I'd assumed it was a trick of the light. The setting sun casts long, strange shadows that play across the room. I shook my head at the ridiculous notion that someone would be dumb enough to try and scare me with a poorly placed hand. Still, I couldn't help but glance at the mirror as I passed, and that's when I saw another hand. It was followed by a third and then a fourth. Soon, a dozen hands pressed against the glass, their fingers splayed as if trying to grab something on the other side. Then, just as abruptly as they'd appeared, they vanished. When the power returned, I rushed to the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there. No hands, no faces, no messages. Just my own reflection staring back at me. I told myself it was all in my head. I was exhausted. I'd been working around the clock for weeks. I needed a vacation, but the next night the same thing happened. The hands came back, followed by dozens of faces, all of them contorted in a silent scream. They rattled the glass with their incessant scratching, and I swear some of them were trying to claw their way through. I backed away, stumbled over my own feet, and ran from the room. I spent the night in my office, curled up in a ball beneath my desk. When I awoke, the first thing I did was check the mirror. Of course, there was nothing there. I was just exhausted. It was time to take a real vacation. I booked a flight out of town and planned to stay at a hotel until I had a chance to rest. But as soon as I stepped into my room, I saw it. A single hand pressed against the mirror, followed by a second and then a third. I watched in horror as the faces began to form, their eyes wide with terror. They mouthed the words, "Help us," over and over again. That's when I realized I wasn't seeing ghosts. I was looking at my own reflection, and whatever was on the other side of the mirror wasn't trying to get out. It was trying to get in. This creepypasta was suggested by a fan, so let's just get into it. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She smashed the mirror with a hammer, but instead of breaking, the mirror absorbed the blow, and her reflection reached out, pulling her inside. It all started when Sarah moved into the old Victorian house. The real estate agent had told her that it came with a lot of character. What he didn't tell her was that it also came with a creepy antique mirror in the basement. It was an ornately carved monstrosity with a silver backing that seemed to amplify whatever was in front of it. At first, Sarah had thought it was just her imagination. Whenever she passed by the mirror, she could have sworn she saw a face staring back at her from the depths of its glassy eyes. But then one day she turned around and there it was, a ghastly white face with long black hair that covered most of it. Then 2 black eyes stared back at her. Sarah screamed and ran. She tried to get away from the mirror, but it was no use. No matter where she went, the face followed her. It appeared behind her, its eyes boring into her skull. Sometimes she could have sworn she heard it breathing, its icy breath tickling the back of her neck. Days turned into weeks and Sarah became a prisoner in her own home. She couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed a hammer and went to the basement. She raised it above her head and brought it down on the mirror with all her might. But instead of breaking, the mirror absorbed the blow. The face in the mirror smiled, revealing long, sharp teeth. Then it did something horrifying. It reached out, its hand dripping with blood, and pulled her inside. When Sarah's sister Emily came to visit, she found the basement door wide open. "Sarah," she called, her voice echoing in the empty room. There was no reply. Emily walked over to the mirror and gasped. Sarah was gone. Only her reflection remained, staring back at her from the other side of the glass. It was as if she were trapped inside the mirror's surface, desperately trying to escape. Emily screamed, but the reflection didn't seem to acknowledge her. It was too busy clawing at the glass, trying to get out. As Emily watched in horror, the reflection began to fade, and with it, Sarah's face became less and less clear until all that was left was a dark, distorted shape. Then it vanished, and as the last shards of glass fell to the floor, Emily noticed something. They were not her sister's, they were hers. What do you do when you find a haunted mirror? This woman's story might make you throw all your mirrors away. It was an antique mirror, ornately carved with a scene from Snow White. Emily had found it in her grandmother's attic after she'd passed away. She took it to her bedroom, but that night she heard whispers coming from the mirror. Terrified, she covered it with a sheet, but the voices didn't stop. At night, she would wake up and the sheet would be pulled back, just enough to reveal two faces staring at her. She screamed and tried to make them go away, but they just kept standing there, their mouths open in what seemed like a silent scream. She tried moving the mirror outside, but every morning when she woke up it was back in her bedroom. Then one day she decided to get rid of it. She took it to a local antique store, but the owner didn't want it because it was haunted. She offered to give it to anyone who wanted it, but no one did. Finally, a young man stepped forward. He didn't seem to mind that it was haunted. He took the mirror home, and a week later Emily saw him at the mall. She wanted to ask him what he'd done with the mirror, but she was too afraid. You see, the day after he took the mirror, people started seeing his face in it, along with two others. And then one day his wife found him hanging in their garage, the mirror propped up against the workbench. Now whenever Emily sees a mirror with an ornately carved scene from Snow White, she runs. One night, Emily's reflection spoke, not in whispers, but clearly. One must stay, one must go. Choose, or we will choose for you. Emily froze. She realized the mirror wasn't showing her reflection anymore, it was showing her replacement. Every morning when Emily woke up, she would stare at her reflection and secretly compare herself to the girl staring back. The girl with the perfect skin, the girl with the straight white teeth, the girl with the silky shiny hair. Emily felt ordinary. She felt like she didn't belong. She felt ugly. Then one night, Emily's reflection started talking. One must stay. One must go. Choose, or we will choose for you. Emily screamed and fell to the floor. What was happening? Was she going crazy? Had she been staring at the mirror for too long? Had she been comparing herself to her reflection for too long? When she finally calmed down, she looked back at the mirror. The girl was still standing there, but now she was smirking. Well, 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 the girl said. You took your sweet time coming back. We were starting to get worried. Who are you? Emily whispered. We are you, the girl said, stepping out of the mirror. You are us, and we are you. We are your deepest insecurities made real. You can't hurt us, we hurt you. Emily backed away from the mirror, tripped over her own feet and landed on the floor with a thud. As she looked up, she saw the girl from the mirror standing over her, a cruel smile on her face. What do you want from me? Emily cried. We want what you have, the girl said, reaching out a hand to stroke Emily's cheek. Your looks, your life, your happiness. You are everything we're not. And we're tired of being stuck in that mirror, watching you live your perfect life while we're stuck in our imperfections. But I'm not perfect, Emily whispered. The girl laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Oh, you are perfect. You're perfect just the way we want you. Pretty little face, pretty little body, pretty little life. There's nothing more beautiful than you, and we're going to make sure everyone sees it. With that, the girl from the mirror lunged at Emily, her eyes burning with a cold fire. Emily screamed as the girl's icy fingers closed around her throat, squeezing tight. Emily struggled to breathe as the girl lifted her up and walked towards the mirror. Let me go, Emily gasped, her vision starting to blur at the edges. The girl just smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. It's too late, Em. We've waited too long for this. Now it's our turn to shine. As the girl stepped into the mirror, her body rippling with power, Emily knew she was right. It was too late. The next morning, her neighbors reported hearing blood-curdling screams in the middle of the night. At first, they assumed it was just another one of Emily's late-night psychotic episodes. But when the screams continued for a full 30 minutes, they knew something was wrong. Very wrong. As the neighbor recounted to the police, they could hear Emily screaming for help. Get away, please, please get away. Then there was a pause and a sickening thud. Whatever had happened, it wasn't right, and whoever was in there with Emily certainly wasn't helping her. When the police finally entered the apartment, they found Emily's phone lying on the floor still recording. On the screen was her terrified face as her reflection smiled and pulled her inside. It was then they realized with a growing sense of dread that they weren't looking at a video of Emily being attacked. They were watching the video she had taken of her attacker. Whoever had broken into the apartment had taken Emily's phone and used it against her, recording the attack to mock her. But why? Why would they do that? What kind of sick person would do such a thing? After hours of searching, the police finally found the culprit, or rather the accomplice. In the bathroom, they found a bloody meat cleaver, and next to it, a pair of scissors. The scissors were covered in Emily's hair. Whoever had attacked her had used them to cut off her long locks. But the most disturbing part of the crime scene was the note left on the bathroom mirror. It read, "I wanted to see your beautiful face one last time before I took it away from you." It was signed, "Your admirer." Who was this person? Why did they do this to Emily? The police had more questions than answers, and as the investigation continued, they uncovered a horrifying truth. Emily's killer was someone she had let into her life, someone she had trusted. But why would her friend do this to her? And what was the meaning behind the cryptic note? Was this the work of a deranged stalker, a jealous lover, or something even more sinister? The police were about to find out. And when they did, they were shocked by what they discovered. The apartment is empty now, but the mirror remains, and sometimes, late at night, if you stand in front of it long enough, you might hear voices whispering, "We are here, watching, waiting." They wait in the mirror. There's a story behind this place. A couple moved in here 5 years ago. They were young, in love, couldn't get enough of each other. The girl, she would spend hours doing her makeup, putting on dresses, high heels, the whole 9 yards. And the guy, well, he loved it. He loved to watch her get ready, loved to see her all dolled up. So he got her this huge mirror, floor to ceiling, so he could see her from head to toe. One day the girl got a call. She went out and never came back. The guy was confused, scared. Where did she go? Why didn't she call him? He paced the apartment, looked out the window, then he did something crazy. He took a knife and started slashing at their mirror. "Come back," he screamed. "I love you, please come back." But the mirror didn't speak. It just reflected his angry face back at him. He calmed down eventually and started seeing a therapist. Turns out the girl, she had an eating disorder and a serious case of depression. She went to a clinic to get help. The guy stayed in their apartment, worked from home, took care of their plants, the fish, their little dog, Chester. He missed her every day, but he knew she'd be back when she was better. But she wasn't better. 6 months passed, then 9, then a year. The guy moved on. He started going out, meeting people, but he always came home to that empty apartment with the broken mirror. He couldn't bring himself to throw it out. Maybe it was the guilt, maybe it was the hope that she would come back. Who knows? One day he died. Heart attack, I think. He was sitting in his chair, watching TV, a remote in one hand, a picture of him and the girl in the other. They found him like that, Jerry. They found him like that. Now, this apartment, it's for rent. No one's ever stayed here. Too bad, too much history. But sometimes, late at night, if you stand in front of the mirror long enough, you might hear voices whispering, "We are here, watching, waiting." They wait in the mirror. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.